We are recording.
Hurrah! So, good morning, everybody. It is stupid o'clock, 7:02, and we are with our Patreon community members on our morning body doubling, up and at 'em, wake up with ADHD AF business. And we have got with us Kimmy, Rachel, Sarah, Kit, I can't read, Fee,
Laura, Kristen, Reese, Monica, and Kim.
Yay! A massive bunch of legends have got up very silly early on a Friday morning with us to start their day right, and that is for our body doubling.
Say hello, everyone. I love it.
Such a good way to start the day. Thank you so much for being here.
Right, so if you guys want to stick yourself on mute, you can leave your cameras on or off. It's up to you, and we'll see you back here in an hour.
Yeah. All right, lovely.
All right. So, now that everyone is cracking on with their body doubling,
We better crack on
with ours. So we have an amazing guest coming up,
We really
Katie
do.
Harrison, all the way from the US of A.
Missouri, right?
Missouri, yeah. Katie emailed us.
Back in September.
I know, it's been a long time coming, but we're finally getting this one out. And I just want to read Katie's email to you. Well, part of it. Here we go. I was diagnosed with severe ADHD when I was 31, 2 years after getting my master's degree in counselling. I'll never forget the psychologist's face when she said, shaking her head, "I literally don't know how you got yourself through college. I'm nearly 39 and I still find myself in deep grief over all of the time lost to this disorder. I started working on a platform providing therapy to people all over the world, and a large bulk of my work has been identifying neurodivergence in the clients I work with and working to navigate the system in their country to achieving a diagnosis. I specialise in working with trans-identifying clients, and there is such a huge overlap in non-cis folks and neurodivergence. I was hoping you might consider doing an episode that explores this overlap, as well as the additional struggles of identifying ADHD in AFAB folks who identify as trans. The two of you are doing amazing work, and that led my client to seek help in getting a diagnosis. I will be recommending your podcast to my clients. Thank you, thank you, thank you."
What a legend. We were so happy to receive that message from Katie that we leapt at the chance to interview. And here we have a little bit more information. One of the biggest hurdles for AFAB folks with ADHD, as you've done a great job unpacking on the podcast, is the assessment and diagnosis process. We understand to an extent the factors that make this process so challenging for ADHD AFAB folks. The ways in which the process becomes a greater challenge for trans identifying folks are complex. For many trans folks, making phone calls can trigger intense dysphoria related to their voice, completing medical forms, being misgendered, dead named, medical trauma, invalidation of identity, etc., create unimaginable barriers. In my experience, the connection to other neurodivergent LGBTQIA+ folks in their way of community significantly improves quality of life. As we're aware, many ADHD sufferers have deep trauma manifested as imposter syndrome and rejection sensitivity, diminished self-worth, as we know only too well, and disparaging narratives that get repeated and eventually believed. The medical trauma we experience in our lifetime as a result of being born female is a global crisis, and many are rightfully fearful and mistrusting of doctors. It can feel like the clinician's intent is to misunderstand you, and it's maddening. I'd like to talk about the need for those in this community who hold privilege to use it and be an advocate for those who are most vulnerable. The number of clinicians who greatly profit from holding referral letters, recommendation letters is disgusting and needs to be talked about. And clinicians need to stop forcing neurodivergent people to prove their identity in a pay-to-play exchange. I can meet with someone and conclude whether or not they're neurodivergent in a session. It's a gross manipulation of the system, and it's not talked about enough. The overlap of AFAB neurodivergence and trans-identifying folks is staggering and not entirely understood. What is understood relates to the divergent way of thinking, and that folks who are ostracized by a society will be less influenced by their constructs or social norms that don't apply to a person already rejected by that society. So this is one hell of a blether. Katie is so fascinating, and we're so excited to share all of their very insightful insights.
Insightful insights.
Yep, it's 7 a.m. and that's what you're getting.
let's just take it away.
ADHDs females, ADHD AF, ADHDs females, the podcast.
Hi, I'm Dawn.
Hi, I'm Laura, and
we are
ADHD
AF.
AF. Seriously. We are two neurodivergent neighbours who moved to the same street at the same time, at the same age, with the same undiagnosed disability. What are the chances?
Since discovering the enormous impact ADHD has had on our lives and the horrifying numbers of missing undiagnosed females, it has become our mission to make some serious noise.
We want to use our voices to raise awareness, break the stigma, and share our experiences in the hope that they help others.
So join us for a chat, or as it's called up here in Aberdeen, a blether.
Trigger warning, we will be covering some really sensitive topics, so please do have a read of the description of each episode before listening.
It's important to note that we are not medical professionals, we're not therapists or coaches, we're not qualified to offer advice or support. What we will do is share our experiences alongside resources and information from professionals. We will talk over each other and we will go off topic and forget the point mid-sentence.
We are both assigned female at birth, which means that we can only speak from the experience of life as AFAB people. However, ADHD AF is an inclusive space. Whatever your gender, you are very welcome here.
Yes, you are.
ADHDs females, ADHD AF.
Katie, thank you for joining us. Will you tell our listeners your name, age if you would like, occupation, anything in that realm?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Katie Harrison, and I'm 39. I am a licensed...
All the best people are.
I know, right? I am a licensed professional counselor, and I currently am contracted with a platform that allows me to see clients for therapy internationally. And so a lot of my clients are based in the UK, Canada, and like based in the United States. And some others are, spread out in other places.
And where are you based?
I am in Missouri in the United States. So I provide mental health therapy to clients around the world. That's my occupation.
And is there anything you specialize in?
I do, yeah. I specialize in religious trauma, and I specialize in people transitioning, so like LGBTQIA issues.
Yeah.
And I like identifying neurodivergence. That's not the same as diagnosing, because professional counselors can't diagnose, which we'll get to that in a different question, which but just like with the perspective that I have, just like being a person who is non-binary, who is professional counselor, and who is also neurodivergent, I do have I feel like the experience that I need to be able to help identify that in people.
Fantastic.
Amazing.
And intuition. I was reading a thing last night about ADHD. Is there a link to being intuitive? Because I suppose if we're taking different things from conversations, or we're masking, or we're reading, we're reading between the lines, or perhaps, often missing the point, but reading different things. It can make us quite intuitive.
Yeah.
I think with intuition too, I think that especially people who are assigned female at birth, and especially those who are diagnosed later in life, I mean, we can call it intuition, but I also think it's a trauma response and hyper-vigilance to survive the world.
Troubleshooting before you get anywhere.
Absolutely, yeah. So having to kind of guess the next step in the script.
Yes. And so you are neurodivergent yourself?
I am, yes. I have ADHD.
Yeah. And when did you come to suspect you had ADHD?
So I kind of was surprised by it. I had a career change that required a lot of self-motivation and creating my own schedule. And so I actually thought that I might have something else going on. Honestly, I thought I had a brain tumor. I mean, I was
wow.
like I was like, what is happening here? I'm losing like chunks of time. This is like new to me. And I was traveling and stuff. So I was driving a lot. And so I went to my doctor, and it was the first time I had like a doctor that was like, because I had health insurance for the first time. And so I was like, oh, I can go to the doctor for this. Like, yes.
Great.
Yes. Which is definitely like a clue that I live where I live. So I went to the doctor and I said, like, hey, this is what's going on. And she said, it sounds like maybe we'll start with like considering you have depression. And so then she prescribed me an antidepressant that just gave me really like intense panic attacks and stuff. So I told her, I said, like, this is not going to work. And so then she actually referred me to a psychologist to do ADHD testing. And I was like, oh, okay. And so then when I did the testing and then did the debriefing with the psychologist, it kind of rocked me a little bit, like, oh shit, like what?
Yeah. And so what age were you when this happened? How long ago was this?
So it was in 2017, and I'm 39 now.
Yeah. Okay, we'll leave it there.
We don't need to get into the math.
Thank you. I appreciate that. However old that makes me, when that happened. Like 32-ish, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what happened. That's how I came to know that I had ADHD. But then once I started to kind of accept that and like take a look back, it all made sense. It really gave me like a new perspective on my life.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So like, are you medical? Did she give you medication? Are you on medication?
I am on medication now. Yeah. I take Adderall, prescribed twice a day. And then I like also have to take an antidepressant because it kind of makes me anxious. And then like a sleep aid because because I can't ever turn my brain off. So
and that's helped you. You feel the benefit and you feel the difference.
It absolutely does. It's sort of like a situation that I've had like ups and downs with it. But like right now it's working well and it is helping me.
That's fantastic.
So obviously with you being in the States, how is the diagnosis process there?
So so for me, I can only kind of speak for myself right now. And I don't have a lot of clients in the US like right now, so I can't really speak to that. But it was relatively easy, honestly. My doctor referred me to a psychologist. I think I had to wait about 2 months before I saw the psychologist. So, okay, let me backtrack. So from start to finish, from me going to my doctor and saying something's wrong to me getting a diagnosis, and then to me getting on meds, it was about a year.
Okay.
And so whenever I got referred to the psychologist, that process was pretty quick. And then I got referred to a counselor. Horrible experience.
Oh no.
She referred me to a psychiatrist, and then I started seeing the psychiatrist, and it took a few months to get on medication that I had a good reaction to. Yeah. And so the process, as far as with the psychologist goes, I had to do like personality test that basically I sat in a cubicle under fluorescent lights and filled out a multiple choice questionnaire that was like always, sometimes, never. And like those are just, I mean, in and of itself, like those types of questionnaires are really challenging for me because I can always think of a caveat to it. And I feel like I need to like make an asterisk that like leads to a full explanation of like why I feel that way.
It's not that straightforward.
Never with me that straightforward. There's always a caveat. And so I had to do that. And then I did an interview with her that was 2 days. And then I had to do a test where I was in a room with a like TV, and they gave me these clickers and they were like, okay, when the ball is in this box under these circumstances, click the clicker on the left. When the ball is in and then I clicked to the right. And so that was supposed to go on for like 30 minutes. And I think I was in there for about 3 before the psychologist came in and was like,
that's enough. That's enough for that.
We're done here. Like, that's a wrap on that. I'm not sitting here and watching this for 30 minutes. So, and then I went back and she gave me my eval and like, kind of talked through everything with me. So So yeah, that was that process. But I also know people who have just gone to their provider or talked to their psychiatrist and said, hey, these are the things I'm struggling with. And the provider just says, well, let's try Adderall.
Right.
You don't have to do any kind of diagnostic
process at all. Yeah. But even here, people are making it up as they go along. And we've got a national healthcare service, and any area you're in is completely different at the moment.
I had no idea until I started working with international clients, the challenges that people face there when it comes to mental health care. I mean, I know that obviously the system here is extremely flawed and also just like falling apart. Yeah. But I had no idea, just like the difficulty and the challenges that people face there. And in Australia,
I think it's like, in terms of like mental health, like they're very quick to give you antidepressants. I could get those in half an hour. But kind of anything else is like, that's it, you know.
Yeah. And it is, and like, I think that's a big difference too, is just that it feels like that a lot of times antidepressants are prescribed and then they're never like titrated. They're never, I mean, there's no like follow up. And I'm just like,
no.
Here's your drugs, off you trot.
Like, what do you mean you've been taking the same prescription at a non-therapeutic level for 2 years and like you haven't had any follow-up? It's like, of course it's not working. It blew my mind. And I think the first experience that I had with that was with a client that I had in Australia. And we'd been working together for not very long, and it didn't take me too long to identify this person has ADHD. And it was not the type of ADHD that I have, which I think is probably similar to you, Dawn.
Okay.
Where I have a lot of hyperactivity. I would present similarly to like how a male would, or a little boy would if they were being evaluated. Very disruptive. Yeah. So that's how I present. And so when I started to notice the presentation of this client, I was like, okay, this is different. And they probably haven't had somebody tell them like you have ADHD because of their presentation. And so I said to them, I said, you know, like these are the things that I'm noticing. These are the traits that I'm noticing in you that really are informing me that like you should get evaluated for ADHD and get on some medication that can help you.
So what could you tell us, like, what is it that you are looking for? What sort of traits kind of signify to you that somebody should be evaluated for ADHD?
Okay, I'll try to do this the best I can, because I think kind of like walking back to the beginning where it's like the intuition, where it does feel like something that's happening under the surface that I've had to kind of pinpoint to identify. So the things that I look for are like areas in their memory where things are missing. Or there's just not like a clear, like they will be talking about one thing from their childhood, and then there's a big gap, and then we start talking about something that's like way later on, right? And so then that's one thing that's like trauma or ADHD, right? And so I'll kind of like click that in, and then really when they're talking about how they engage with work, typically folks who are AFAB who have ADHD have like they're pretty successful because they have a lot of the qualifiers of like perfectionism and like fears around failure and things like that. They may have been identified in their childhood as like gifted, but like didn't really feel gifted in some way. And so I look for those things. I also look for like relationships that they engage in that are not very balanced, and also like in ways that they're being taken advantage of in those relationships.
So the people pleasing, low self-esteem kind of
like inability to track like patterns in other people's behaviors and things like that, and how they like people that are really like prone to being gaslit, and then they can't rely on their working memory, and so they fall into a trap of assuming other people are right, or just the default of like like operating in the default of like this like kind of like wrongness about them, so they must be wrong about this, and like so I really just try to like I don't even try. I just am able to identify those characteristics in people really early on because I've lived them.
What would they be coming to you for? Would they be coming to you to get identify for that, or they would just be coming to you, say, with trauma, with whatever, and then that's what you're now seeing.
Yeah, most people that I have identified are resistant to the idea in the beginning.
Okay.
Like they aren't able to really, because there's not a lot of information and there's so much stigma around it, where when I bring it up or when I suggest it, the immediate reaction is like, oh, no way. Like that can't be me because like I'm not hyperactive usually is the stigma. Like it is like I can sit for long periods of time and really focus on something. And I'm like, that's hyper focus. And that is a trait and a characteristic of somebody who has ADHD, especially who is born female.
So when you were talking about, sorry, I know I keep going off piece, but I just wanted to talk about it. So when you were talking about people who are transitioning, you mentioned when we spoke before that there might be a link. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You tell me.
Yeah. So and I know that I emailed you earlier and said that I might be able to answer some questions within questions. And so that question kind of really unfolded for me when I started to acknowledge my own ADHD traits and like recognize my own identification as non-binary and bisexual. And so when I started to kind of look at that. And so the overlap that exists can be kind of defined by social constructs. Okay, so like when we look at social constructs in general, so we look at gender as a social construct, not sex, but gender. We look at like taxes and money as a social construct, education as a social construct. So like think of those kinds of things, right? Like the things that socially exist and wouldn't without society. So like when I was growing up, the way I grew up in a really small town in a really small school. And so the way that I was handled in my ADHD was to push aside, right? So my memory in school is like I was in a desk outside of the classroom all the time. Or in ISS or in a place where I could be contained and I wouldn't be a distraction. And so I was consistently my whole life pushed outside of these places where everybody else just seemed to fit in naturally. And so I almost kind of just from a really young age felt outside of everything else. Like there was something wrong with me that couldn't be defined or explained. And so when we do that as a society to other people and we push them outside of society and say like, you belong on the fringes, there's something wrong with you that isn't accepted in here, then what happens is that the constructs that society has framed life in don't apply. They don't make sense to us. We are not conditioned to them because we are pushed outside of them. And therefore, we defy them because for no other reason other than we didn't learn them. So then as adults or like as we are like developing and learning, we aren't persuaded by those things. And so whereas like if you look at somebody who's neurotypical, right, and they are unable to really understand how somebody could not define their gender, it's because they were conditioned to that.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like almost everything exists in a gray area.
Yeah.
Almost every presentation of a person can like exist to me in this area that does not apply to society or social constructs. And so I think most importantly that is where that develops, that overlap. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I read this thing about neurodivergent people. Obviously, everything is a huge sweeping generalization, obviously.
Right.
But neurodivergent people and rules. If a neurodivergent person can understand the rules, so if they're told a rule and they can get to grips with the why, then they could quite happily follow it to the book. But if there's just a rule for rule's sake, or somebody explains a rule to them and it doesn't make sense, then there's just no way that they're going to be able to adhere to it along those lines. So that's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
But it really makes sense to me.
And if you take a look at that in terms of religious trauma and the overlap that I see in neurodivergent people and religious trauma in LGBT people, it is that there isn't a lot of sense that can be made logically and reasonably and tangibly in religion. You have these kids who feel wrong and like there's something wrong with them. And then on top of that, if they ask questions in Sunday school or to their parents under these strict religious settings, they are looked at as like, that is like sinning, and like that's like the devil trying to leak its way in or whatever. And if they are taking literally things that shouldn't be taken literally because that's how we work, then it's from an early age that they feel like this disconnect from that, which means they feel this disconnect from their family, which means they are probably going to hell, or they just dismiss it entirely.
Yeah.
And are just kind of there to people please. So I just want to say just for a second, my best friend is here in this room, so I feel weird. Her name's Sarah. She will not want me to put her on camera, but she is here. And she has ADHD and she's also autistic. And so when you said the thing about the rules, one thing I learned about her is that when she was really young, she found an etiquette book. And this is something that I found in a lot of situations where people have told me that they did too, when I've been talking to clients. She found an etiquette book and she read it as a kid and she just used it as a script for how to engage socially so that she didn't feel so distant and so that is something that I hear a lot of.
I think it's also like, for me, sorry, you've really got me on one now, the religion thing. I think that it really kind of messed with my sense of reality, and I don't know that I feel like it's a contributing factor. I think like religion and trauma and ADHD all mixed together in a lovely little pot. Like at times in my life, there's been such intense disassociation that I literally have walked around like I'm in a film. Like, or I'm watching. No, I'm not even in the film. I'm watching the film. And there's so many times where, life is stranger than fiction. Like, you couldn't write it. Crazy shit happens all the time. And when it does, my brain will go, see, it's not real.
Can I ask you both of you a really weird question that like is, of course, it's just kind of off on one, whatever. So when you are like fantasizing or daydreaming, are you a person in your fantasy, or are you watching it as though two people are engaging? So like, if we're talking like sexual fantasies, are you in the fantasy or are you watching it play out?
That's a good question.
I have no idea.
I'm in it.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I'm like, am I in it? Am I not in it? I don't know if I am. Maybe I don't know if I am. I don't think I am.
You look so troubled right now by this. You look so scared.
I feel like I'm not going to know until like I'm having a proper sexual fantasy.
And this just isn't the place for that right now.
Yeah, like,
tell us why.
I don't know why. I was having a conversation with my friend Sarah the other day, and we were talking about it. And I hope this is okay.
Oh yeah,
okay.
Of course.
Like before telling. Okay. And she said something about like fantasies, and she was like, "I've never been in them," and I was like, "What?" And I was blown away because like I'm a Leo, and I am the main character in every story. Because that's just
leading role energy, absolutely.
Yeah. I was curious if her experience was similar to other people's, and one thing about her is that like she has ADHD in the way that most people who are AFAB have it, and so it's very much like quiet. I don't know how else to say it other than like she suffers in silence with those traits, whereas like I am louder and more ready to fight. I'm more confident that like the things that I think and believe are true. They're real. So
Oh gosh, I don't think that. I never think I'm right. I'm just so filled with like rage that I'll just fight it. But I'll always think I'm probably wrong. But the feeling outweighs any.
I totally forgot the question.
I have no idea what the question is either.
No idea, but let's dive
Okay.
in.
Let's go back into the actual question.
Yes, but that was amazing.
I told you I was tangent for days.
So what do you think undiagnosed ADHD has cost you?
I think that more than what it's cost me is like the understanding of how many people and adults had to fail me in order to be as significantly ADHD as I am. And so I think just the number of adults in my life, the number of teachers, everything who failed me as a person, and like that has cost me like trust, and like it's cost me just like having to function without any worth in relationships without any worth, feeling just like wrong just internally my whole life, just like. So I think that what it's cost me is just like a really long process of grief, and like feeling every stage of that since my diagnosis, and just feeling an overwhelming amount of like I was robbed of time, and I was robbed of the childhood experience, and like I don't have memories. Large parts of my education and like large parts of my childhood are just erased because it was easier to just remove me from the space than to like identify that there was a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, and then it's also just cost me money.
Yeah. Lots of money.
Relationships that have been really not well, just a lot in that regard.
And do you feel like, having gone through all that grief and having to identify all of that, do you feel like you're out the other side of that? Do you feel like or even like the relationships that you say that you lost, like can you sort of look back on that and go, okay, that's what that was, and put it in a box?
I think that I am getting closer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that like I will ever get to a point where I don't harbor at least some level of resentment towards like the people who failed me as a child. And also just the people who like refused to like see me as I was going through my diagnostic process and things like that, and like just believe me. So I think that I will always like harbor some pain there because it's like defined a lot of things for me. And so I think that I don't know. I hope, but like right now I feel like not ready. Yeah,
absolutely.
So what's changed for you since diagnosis?
Like every single thing. I mean, and I mean that on so many levels. Like I'm not in the same marriage I was. So my marriage ended after my diagnosis.
Oh.
What?
I said, wow.
Yeah.
like after, as a result of, like in
yeah. No, I'm fine. I will try to be really concise about this. And so like something that I've learned now that I didn't know then was that I functioned in a lot of the relationships that I existed in before my diagnosis in a really disadvantaged way that I wasn't aware of because of my inability to really track and to pick up on patterns of other people's behavior in relation to me. I also have this weird thing where it's easier for me to just take the blame of things and I can deal with it internally because I have my whole life. I've gotten a really good system of how to deal with like being wrong or being blamed for things that I'm not a part of. And so I existed in a lot of the relationships that I was in, including my marriage, in this very imbalanced way of, so when I was going through the diagnostic process, those people in my life who seemed intent on misunderstanding me were really reluctant to support me through that process. In fact, in like kind of an opposite way of rejecting it and defining it for me. And so then as I got on medication and started to be able to like see and remember and track and defend myself and set boundaries, all of those things, those relationships that I was in started to fail in a really dramatic way. And then the people started to protest that in really dysfunctional and harmful ways to me. And so so it changed everything. Everything is different.
It's funny, isn't it? We were talking about this the other night about people who benefit from us not having boundaries. It's suited them just fine. That you would take the blame, that you would be the scapegoat, that you would be the, oh, don't mind me, little me over here. Like we know it only too well. And I totally hear what you're saying, especially in terms of going on medication. You know, it's not like that. Oh, suddenly, glass on the brain, I don't think, but it's like bit by bit, you're like, hang on a minute.
Yeah. And just kind of something that
is behaving like this. Like, hang on, this is bullshit. Like,
And like, when like the two of you have talked a lot about this before, but like the comorbid like disorders that go along with undiagnosed ADHD. So using past drug use or using past like depressive or anxious diagnoses to try to like explain away,
If you are finding this podcast helpful and you're in a position to do so, we are asking that you help us by signing up to our Patreon. In pledges starting at just £4 a month, it will give you access to our We Are ADHD AF community forum, in which we are both active members and we all support and learn from each other. You will also get access to behind-the-scenes content, exclusives, offers, blogs, vlogs, the works, everything in the kitchen sink. Your pledge will also mean that we will be able to continue to put out weekly episodes of ADHD as Females, the podcast.
Alternatively, if you would prefer just to make a donation, you can do so by visiting buymeacoffee.com/ADHD as Females. We know that our words are helping people in 164 countries and counting.
We really appreciate your support in supporting us to continue supporting the ADHD community.
If you are ADHD AF and you want more ADHD AF, join the We Are ADHD AF community. www.patreon.com/ADHD as Females.
So we compare the late diagnosis roller coaster to a grief cycle.
Oh, yeah.
So where do you think you are on that grief cycle?
So I think I'm at the stage of that where, okay, if you look at grief as like a box, right? I don't know if you've ever seen this like diagram where there's a box and there's a button and then there's a ball and it's bouncing around. You've seen that? Okay.
Yes, I haven't seen that.
So basically, like the ball is like how big your grief is and how much it consumes you, and the button is like the emotional reaction to it. And so the emotional reaction to grief is always the same. It's just the ball in the box gets smaller. So in the beginning of the grief, it's always being pressed. The button is always being pressed with the ball. But as you grow to understand that and heal, the ball gets smaller and smaller. So the button gets pushed less frequently.
Okay.
So like I would say right now my ball is small, right? But when that button is pushed, it is painful and it brings back all of those things that I feel. The way that I manage that and the way that I deal with that is through my work. And through that is like just telling people who don't have a diagnosis yet, but who we're working through some of the grief of their own neurodivergence. I think that the way that I deal with that is by looking at those people and saying, you have ADHD. I know that you have ADHD. These are the ways that I know you do. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Like we know those truths. And that is important. I feel like for me to be able to work with people who are in that space and who are not yet diagnosed or who have been told by doctors and professionals who have not done the due process of continued education to inform themselves on what that looks like and what that looks like in people who are born female, and to tell them that like they know more than those people who have told them, oh, well, you're not a delinquent, so you don't have ADHD, or
you've not been arrested, you've not been kicked out of school, etc., etc. Yeah.
And so I just feel like that it is that is helping heal through that process.
Yeah, and that's helping you heal as well. Yeah. That's really cool. I think we feel a bit like that with just hearing from people. Like we're not trained in anything, we don't know anything, all we know is our own experiences, but whenever we're hearing from people, which is every day, multiple times a day, people are reaching out to us, and it's like, you know, a different version of the same story, and in being able, in knowing that is a shared experience on some level, and connecting like that is cathartic, and
yeah, it definitely helps you feel less alone, because I think if it wasn't for all of this, going through this whole process, if I didn't have this community around me, I think it would be a lot harder. Definitely.
And I think also quite often, like, there's a whole, I don't know if you heard of the word relief, and it's grief and relief together, and that's what a lot of people allegedly feel in the beginning. But like, even with the relief, like, I remember feeling relieved immediately. It really is such a big deal. Like, it's actually a really, really big deal. And so for people who don't understand that, it's really, really hard, because often people are missing the mark in the ways to support you, etc. And that's very, very hard. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think too, it's like the pushback, I guess. And I don't know how to really define the pushback other than describing it as like diminishing people's experience or dismissing people's experience by calling it a trend, or like by saying things like, oh, since COVID or since the pandemic, everybody thinks they have ADHD or is neurodivergent. And I think that in the same way that I think people use transgender care as an example of this, by saying, oh, like before people started to identify and speak on and be comfortable in their bodies as a transgender person, and be somebody to other people to like look to as like, I can do that too. There were limited resources for people who are transgender in terms of being able to identify that and be able to get on HRT or get on hormone blockers or get on or have like surgeries that are gender affirming and all of those things. And now that need has become more vocal and people are more confident in who they are as a person to be able to ask for what they need, that instead of saying, okay, that there's a correlation here, people are using that as like causality and saying, oh, there are more clinics because this trend is bursting or whatever. And it's like, no, people are more open to sharing their experiences and helping other people identify those experiences and make sense of them in their own life. So the need for care is increasing. And instead of like saying that we should limit the care provided so that we can limit the cases of not real experiences from others, that we just provide the care that's needed based on what is being shown that is needed. And so it pisses me off so much. It really pisses me off when that like narrative is pushed, and it makes me really angry.
100%. Can I just ask something that popped into my head? So you were obviously talking about your friend Sarah. She's neurodivergent as well. Is it a case that people around you, friends that you have that are neurodivergent, did you meet them as part of the community when you went through this experience, or were you one of the people that identified neurodivergence and then, like dominoes, they all fell down around you because we congregate?
Well, it's funny. I worked at an acute psychiatric hospital for children for about 7 years. And Sarah hired me to work there in her department. And so we worked together for a long time before either of us really connected outside of work, because we were masked. And, and we were so like self-conscious of showing the other one any part of ourselves, right? And so, but then as I got my diagnosis and I started to unravel some of the relationships that I was in, she actually messaged me after I had spoken to other people about like some stuff that was going on in my marriage. And she messaged me and said, hey, these are the things that I heard if you need to talk. And I mean, I was over there in an hour just, and I don't feel like we've spent a day apart since, honestly. Like, and just having that comfort in another person. And I think that she knew, she could identify in herself at that point that she probably was on the spectrum. Like she knew she was on the spectrum at that point. And so I think that like, honestly, a lot of the ability that I have now to know and not to like question myself in spaces has been her like affirmation and her like gentle approach to me, to saying to me, no, like this is not you, this is them. Or like, this isn't you not knowing what you're talking about. This is other people trying to trip you up. And like, and just her ability to like hold that space for me while I kind of unraveled all of that and like rebuilt from there was like essential for me to like get out of that masking, like just, avoidant pattern, really.
Yeah. Tell us some positive sides of ADHD since diagnosis.
Or in the world
of
anything
ADHD.
positive you like.
So I think that kind of a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, like where I hate even like coming close to saying like your trauma makes you stronger, because it's not true. It makes you weaker and it's painful and it hurts. And there's nothing about trauma that makes a person stronger. In fact, without trauma, I'd be a much stronger person. I think though that my ability to be able to like see in other people the things that I've experienced with really limited information and like the ability that I have to empathize with those people in order to draw that out is a reaction or a consequence of my ADHD, and my hyper-vigilance and my intuition and those things are a consequence of my ADHD and my trauma and all of those things. And so I think that those things are obviously a huge part of like what makes me the person that I am, as well as like, I feel like that without neurodivergence, like the world would be a lot dimmer.
Yeah.
A lot like there just like art and music is really instrumental to like our worlds. And so just that is, I mean, I don't know how else to say that. Like, I feel like neurodivergent people add the things to the world and add the things that to society that like are really important to like our hearts.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's a lovely thing to say.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool. And also, you know, thinking outside the box opens the doors, doesn't it? Like, you know, lead to discoveries and
Yes.
yeah.
I wish there was a way to think outside the box to do taxes.
That's what neurotypical people are for.
Yeah.
I'm just like, if I could think outside the box to understand that, that'd be great.
Well, if you figure it out, give us a shout.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you want to add?
Anything you think you haven't covered or you want to go back into, or anything at all?
I'm trying to think. I guess like what do you feel like since you started this podcast? Like what do you feel like you've learned from it that has that really will like that it has impacted like the way that you view yourself?
God, people don't normally ask us questions.
I know.
Don't
I think that I felt very alone when I first kind of started looking into this, because why am I struggling and all these people are successful and still managing to like smash life and do really well? Like that was something that I just couldn't get my head around. And it's not until you really look into it and look at how different it plays in each individual person that you can really see, you know, the diverseness between everyone that suffers. And it's opened my eyes up to that, and it's allowed me to be a lot more understanding and compassionate towards other people because of that.
Yeah. I feel like probably the main thing that's changed, like from starting the podcast, from going on this journey, is I have not just a purpose, like a fucking crusade. Like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, right, like every day, because it's like my own experience and then hearing other people's experiences all the time, it's like it doesn't add up. I've said many times on the podcast that I obviously through my husband's work I managed to get private healthcare. So me just like speaking on the phone after a week, diagnosed, medication, bang, happened. Now I know myself that I have had more in-depth GP appointments for depression, eating disorders, anxiety, whatever. So really in my mind, like, I know how straightforward this process can be because I've lived it. I've actually lived it and I've seen it. And the only thing that's different between a GP appointment for depression and a private diagnosis, which takes an hour, is the pills they give you and the questions they ask you. And that is fucked up. And the thing, and beyond that, what I know is, for once in my life, probably for the first time ever, I know I'm not wrong. Yes. Nobody can tell me that I'm wrong. For once in my life, I know I'm right. I haven't misremembered it. I haven't got the details wrong. I know this for a fact, and that's it. So I will fight for it forever because I know I'm right.
One thing that you didn't ask, and I wonder if it's the question that you thought that you just had a conversation about whether you should ask or not, is what I think should be changed about the diagnostic process. Yes. And I will say something about that. Okay. So, like right now, the only people that have the authority to properly diagnose ADHD are psychologists, psychiatrists, and medical doctors. And I feel like mental health counselors, social workers, and anybody who has like a advanced degree in mental health we should lobby so that we have the ability to take a course and diagnose people who have ADHD, because the only reason why we can't is because the type of medication that is prescribed to treat it. And it's also the only medication or the only diagnosis that is functions like that. And it's fucked up because diagnosing somebody with a disorder is different from prescribing medication, obviously. And so if psychiatrists and medical doctors are not comfortable prescribing ADHD meds to people based on like diagnostics of like mental health counselors or social workers, then that is a reflection of their competence, not ours.
Yeah.
And so to gatekeep diagnosis of ADHD based on perceived fears of like people misusing medication is fucked up.
Yeah.
It is limiting in so many ways because most people who reach out and ask for help from therapists are women.
Yeah.
And the fact that that whole process is extremely misogynistic and built on a society that favors the patriarchy is reflective of that. Yeah. And it's fucked up.
It really is.
Sorry, that was a tangent.
Yeah, good. I enjoyed it.
No, it was fantastic.
It pisses me off, and it is like something for me that I think it was your episode or your podcast I was listening to where somebody was talking about a woman who wasn't able to get diagnosed because her symptoms weren't present in two different areas of her life because she was a person who stayed at home. Yeah. And I tell you, I was fucking raging. Yeah. I was so pissed off listening to that. I was just like, that is the most.
I've actually got goosebumps now. You've just made me angry again.
It's so messed up. And it is a reflection of that. It is a reflection of women, again, being dismissed and saying like, well, figure it out. Like,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I think that leads us to our last question, which is, what is the most ADHD thing you've done this week?
I mean, okay, so the main, like probably today, about 2 hours before we started, I rearranged my entire space here and got really hyper focused on the background and was like digging through stuff and like really just completely took everything out of my space, put it into the other room, moved it back in 2 hours before we started talking. That was one for sure that ranks up there. But I mean, I think that my entire existence is like, I mean, yeah. I walked around the other day. I had made some peanut butter toast with honey on it. And I ate a slice of it while I was doing something. And then I go to grab the other slice and it's gone. And for hours, I spent looking for this piece of toast. It wasn't until I took my sweater off and the toast got stuck to my hair. I took my sweater off, and I realized that for the entire day, I walked around with this piece of peanut butter honey toast stuck to my back. So that's probably up there.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
All day I'm smelling peanut butter and honey. I'm like, it's haunting me. What is happening? And then so that's pretty up there.
Good. Superb. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's been so lovely to talk to you. It really has. Like, we could talk to you all night. Really
Yeah.
good. It's been wonderful. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was so nice.
No, thank you. It's been lovely to speak to you.
And you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye.
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 How amazing was Katie?
Love. Thank you so much. You absolute legend. That was really, really so insightful. And we're just really happy that we could share that on our platform. So yeah, we hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Thank you so much, Katie. We literally could have talked to them for hours, couldn't we?
Absolutely.
We really could. So we also want to thank everybody who has filled out that survey in time for the deadline for informing parliamentary debate in the UK about ADHD and ASD assessment. We had about 700 clicks in the end.
Which is amazing.
Incredible. And thank you to Kat for writing the MP template letter. If you've not done so already, it really would be so incredible if you could. We really have to join forces to make change happen. All you've got to do is tap the link in our bio and download it, add your details, and there's even a link there to find who to contact and how.
Yeah.
And speaking of activism, that is my ADHD rabbit hole.
Yes, it is.
Day and night, reading everything there is about policy and all the rest of it. And we'll talk more about that in another episode. What's yours?
My rabbit hole. I'm still stuck on these blooming animal noises. Honestly.
It's an ongoing thing.
It's an ongoing thing. I just want to apologise for everyone in Wales for my misrepresentation of the owl animal noise.
Sincere apology to the Welsh people.
But I got this information from a website called omniglot.com, which tells you all the different animal sounds.
We are just the messengers, not the experts.
And no, we've had a few comments saying it's not what you guys said it is. We just say twit twoo. Although I did get a message from someone else that said it was something else. I can't even remember. But now I'm going down bird noises. Apparently in France, the duck noise is qua qua.
Très chic. Even the ducks are chic.
I know, it sounds so French. And there's so many more. So yeah, I'm still obsessing over that. And my friend's coming over from Denmark this weekend and I'm going to ask her about all their animal noises.
And we'll report back because everyone is waiting to hear it.
Absolutely.
So we've had some really good listener rabbit holes this week. One of them, I absolutely love this. Researching jewellery making suppliers for 2 solid weeks. Still not purchased any materials. Now becoming an expert in freshwater pearls.
As you do. And we have another one here. The Hills and the Hills New Beginnings. If you don't know what we're talking about, we're not just talking about Mounds of Earth. We're talking about the TV show.
From the early noughties.
Yeah, so ask me anything about where they are now and the crossover appearance of rando people who were season 1 and season 2 and went on to appear in other reality TV shows, Southern Charm, Vanderpump and Rules, etc. ADHD AF Adulting.
I absolutely have, because I did the same when the new one came out. I watched it when I was with Perez Hilton. There's like a whole standoff. There's a whole beef. It's great. I'm with you.
Amazing. So that brings us now onto our most ADHD thing.
So I've got a weird one this week, and I'll try and be brief, but that's not my strong point. Basically, I had a bit of a to-do this week. Somebody let me down, not personally, but professionally, and not ADHD AF related. And I was fine with it. I kind of went, okay, that's not for me. Jobs are good, and we've got enough to crack on. And we've been working really, really hard, obviously doing all of the stuff for the survey, etc. And then all the other plates were spinning, the tour, etc. And it got to the next day about 10 a.m. and I suddenly felt like I'd been hit by a bus, literally. And I had to sit down. I felt like an aching in my bones and like an actual like heaviness on me. Like everything felt heavy. And I actually felt quite upset. And I got myself ready. I was like, right, I'm just going to shake this off. I did a workout. And I felt better, but I still felt this heaviness. So I was like, right, the sun's actually shining. It's freezing, but the sun's shining. I'll walk around. I'll go and look at the sea, breathe in the fresh, lovely Scottish air, and I'll be right as rain. Did that, came home, still felt it. And I sat down and I just started to cry. Like I had to cry. And in my head, I was thinking like, I wasn't thinking I'm upset about X, Y, Z. And that this is the feeling that I'm feeling. I was thinking to myself, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Why do I feel this way? And then I was thinking, well, it must be because of what that person did. And it must be because of this historical thing that's happened.
Trying to join the dots and
trying
figure
to
it out,
justify why I was crying. And it only, the next day, I woke up absolutely fine. And what I've come to suspect, and the reason why I'm showing this is because I would love anybody else's input on this as we're all picking apart how neurodivergence presents in us.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might be burnout.
Well, based on the last couple of days leading up to that, where you were deep in this activism stuff and it was go, 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 you hadn't stopped
and I hadn't, because I'm away next week, so I didn't have the weekend off. So basically, I think I'd worked about 11 or 12 days straight, something like that. And I think I might have just been tired. And actually, for some reason, I don't ever feel tired. And that's not medication related. That's since I was a child. My mum said I used to run myself ragged and I'd only stop when I had a temperature, basically.
Yeah.
So I wonder if anybody else experiences this, because when I woke up the next day, I felt exactly how I felt about the scenario that had happened the day before. It was only on that one day because I was looking for something to be upset about. And I wonder if, because how my ADHD presents is in emotional dysregulation, reject sensitive dysphoria predominantly, that when I'm tired, I don't get those cues and signals. And so I was flooded with emotion and my brain was trying to justify the emotion.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope I did that quick enough. How about you?
Well, mine's a little bit lighter.
Surprisingly.
It's just because I do these things, you know. It was the day we secured our venue for
the
Aberdeen Too Much tour. I'd been dressed for the full day and was pretty much ready to go. So I'd come home and I was going out for dinner with a friend.
Yeah.
And so I got myself ready, put my jacket on upstairs, topped up my makeup and ran out the door. And I'm driving there, and just as I was away to park, I thought to myself, what shoes have I got on? Because my feet feel a little bit uncomfortable and not like, these don't feel, something didn't feel right, you know?
Yeah.
And as I actually consciously thought about what I had on my feet, I realised that I was wearing my slippers. Yeah, so the worst part is both parties, myself and my friend and the other people that were joining us, were all running late. So like I phoned them and I was like, I have to go home. And I'm on speakerphone and the three of them are in the other car. They're like, what do you mean? What's wrong? What's wrong? And I was like, I've got my slippers on. So they had to phone the restaurant and tell the restaurant that we're going to be late because I had to go home and put some proper shoes on.
That's so funny. I'm slightly gutted that you didn't just go to the restaurant in your slippers, to be fair.
To be fair, when I got there with my actual shoes on, I walked in and I was like, I could have so got away with it.
Yeah.
Having said that, I wouldn't have gotten away with it because my friends would have absolutely outed me to everyone. They'd have been shouting and pointing and screaming, so there was no way.
But you are so legendary with these things. On the day that I was feeling very done in, we did a live and Dawn wore her Wayne's World hat just to cheer me up, and it did really cheer me up because, let's be honest, guys, we are Wayne and Garth. That's what's happening here.
Yeah.
So
we have some most ADHD things from our listeners as well. So,
oh yeah, I absolutely love this one. I found my scissors in the fridge.
I can totally understand that. I can relate.
I know you've put your sellotape in the fridge before, but like the scissors, there's just something about it that's just like, what?
Yeah.
It's amazing. I love
It's
it.
a good one. And just to end things this week,
Yes.
I think this one's rather nice.
Okay.
So I asked my ADHD assessment nurse, so am I ADHD AF? Blurt, after crying, talking my symptoms for the last hour. He said, those girls are great.
I love it. That is a really good note to end on, actually.
It is. So,
And if you'd like to see our greatness in person, IRL, you can come and see us at our Too Much tour. The first date is in Aberdeen, with more dates to be released very soon. The Aberdeen event will be our first ever live event, so it is extra special. So even if you are not in Aberdeen, we guarantee it'll be worth the journey.
yeah, absolutely.
The venue in the Chester Hotel Granite Suite is incredible.
It's something else. It really
It
is.
really is. And we're so grateful to them, and we just can't wait to do it and to meet so many of our lovely listeners.
Yeah. Saturday the 4th of March from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Yes.
And it's going to be a dopamine-filled, fun, exciting event.
It is. I mean, there's also going to be tears as well, because obviously we're talking about what we're talking about. But it's all about unmasking and bringing the community together.
Yes.
And we did have somebody message us say, like, is it just a social? It is an actual show.
Yeah.
It's not going to be educational as such. It's going to be our podcast in live form. So we will be talking about the feeling and the experience behind this unique experience that we all share of late diagnosed ADHD. And there will be some audience participation, and it will be very special.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we better round up and speak to our lovely Patreon members who have been working away whilst we've been recording this. So that is your hour up, people, and we would love you to say goodbye to our listeners, if you would.
Bye!
ADHDs females, ADHD AF, ADHDs females, the podcast.